Welcome to Women's Perspectives, the podcast that celebrates powerful women who help change the world and strive to shape our future. From challenging conventional beauty ideals to championing sustainability, women in fashion are shaping the path towards a more equitable and ethical future. I'm really excited because I am Yara Shahidi, and today I am talking to the model, actress, activist, Liya Kebede. Thank you for joining us. And I'm really excited to delve into the topic of really harnessing your platform for social good, because I think that is something that you really set the standard on pretty immediately in terms of showing us the importance of giving back and the way we could actually use fashion to benefit our communities and the world at large.
Thank you so much. It's really lovely to meet you.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you. I think you're one of the faces that I feel like I walked in feeling like, oh wait, we haven't met. Because I feel like I know you, because you're a face that we see everywhere.
I feel the same with you.
Thank you, I'm glad. But I really wanted to start in talking about your journey generally. First, in terms of stepping into the fashion space and what fashion had meant to you at the time. And yeah, really what the beginning of your journey felt like.
Well, I grew up, I was born in Ethiopia. I grew up in Ethiopia. I'm Ethiopian. And I left Ethiopia maybe when I was like 18, looking to be a model, I guess, which was kind of a crazy idea at the time because it's such a faraway thought.
Yeah. And what gave you that idea?
When I was in high school, we had these like sort of really cool fashion shows that the kids used to put together to earn money to pay for your graduation. That was kind of how we did it. And it was the coolest thing to do and to be a part of. So every girl wanted to be in those shows, including myself. Yeah. I wasn't that special. And I think it sort of grew in me, and I really like thought, oh my God, this is so fun. And I started looking at magazines then a little bit, and I always remember I had actually this really cool picture of Naomi. I think it was a Gap ad, and black and white picture, and I had that on my wall, thinking, "Wow, this is so cool. I really want to do this." The journey was very long, obviously, from there to this. So it really took a while. It was not really. I wasn't like discovered and like suddenly showed up in there, because that's some stories. It was a process.
Is there anything that surprised you most about that process, or? I guess part of the question, too, is just what was the drive to continue?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. So I think that a lot of the times, I do remember there was a lot of moments where I actually wanted to quit, and it happened quite a lot. Because it was really hard. I was alone. I was, an 18-year-old, and I really wanted to go to college. Yeah. Which I never did. It was a big deal for me. Studies was a big deal. I was quite studious and kind of loved, I guess there was that regular path I also wanted to take, and somewhere I thought modeling was maybe too fantastical, and like I was trying it but hoping that maybe I could just pay for college. It was sort of in that way. I never thought I could really just do that. And there was a lot of moments where I thought I can't keep doing this, when I couldn't find an agency, after like the 12th agency, like you started to give up, and then every time I was like really at the last thing saying, okay, this is it. Something would happen. I cannot explain it, but just something would happen, and I'd be like, this is so strange, and I'll be back into it again.
Yeah. Wow. Because I think it's so many people's experiences, because you get into certain industries for a love of the creativity, a love of the craft, and we forget that there's still a machine behind it.
Completely.
And there still takes so much work, and there's so much rejection in this thing that should be so human and so creative and so loving. And I can imagine it takes a certain kind of constitution to navigate that.
I mean, but also at the same time, when you think about it, fashion is kind of, it's very small, and you're trying to belong to this really, really small group. And you're trying to come into this space, and a lot of the time, the space is already filled in. Also, there's also a lot of that as well. But also, at the time when I started, really, diversity was not at all the thing, right? So it was completely the opposite of diversity, actually. When I started out, it was really the token one Black girl, and Asian as well. It was the two minorities that, they were represented in that way. And so it's kind of hard to come in and now, you know that your job is to be the other one and someone else has to come out of that space. It wasn't like there's enough for two or there's three or four, So it's a very complicated situation. I think that was a really big shock to me at the time.
I think in the last couple of years in particular, the question of diversity, I feel like, has been front and center in the fashion conversation. I'm curious, just from your perspective, how have you seen things evolve in terms of progress that has been made, things that feel eerily stagnant in regards to that feeling of walking in and being the only one or being one of a few?
I mean, it's just completely night and day. It's incredible to see this today. When I'm backstage now, it's like you see a sea of colors, and that was never the case. It's incredible. It's really, really incredible. Whether it's going to stay, I don't know. That's always the problem. You just don't know if it's like a phase, a trend, a moment. I hope not. And so I think there's a lot of brands that are really putting real things behind them wanting to be really diverse and changing the way things are done. And I appreciate that a lot. It's funny to see, like, now there's so many, even for example, just to look at the Black girls, there's so many Black models. I don't even know them. And that's like a shock because usually you know every single other Black person that's walking the runway, and now I don't because there's so many already. There's new ones coming in and it changes all the time. And it's great. That's how it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Technically. But also it's not just obviously color, it's all gender, sexual, all of that is a lot more inclusive, and it's great. I mean, it's sort of freeing, right? Fashion is supposed to be, in a way, the one place where you can really be yourself.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I feel like very quickly you became known as not only really an iconic model, but also an philanthropist, an entrepreneur, and that was really prominent. And I'm curious, because has there been a difference in terms of being able to walk into these spaces more empowered or with more agency?
I can speak personally for me that for myself, it made me feel better. And it made me feel like I have more agency and I have more power for myself, within myself, I think. Just because, I mean, and it's the same, I'm sure, as an actor as well. It's like you can't just sit around waiting for the phone to ring. It's like you have no power over your own life. So I always feel like, I think the one thing that was amazing for me that I had done at the time was having something else, building something else, having a passion and going after that. And I think that when you have something else to offer for yourself, I think you feel good. And I think, like, for me, there was something that it was always part of, I think, of something that I wanted to do in this world, just because, I grew up in Ethiopia, and you grow up surrounded by quite a lot of poverty. It's part of just your everyday. So it's something that's very sort of integrated in your culture, and my mom always did that, and we always have to, every year maybe she'll go and feed the hungry, or it's part of our culture and the social sort of fabric of also living in Ethiopia and living. It's very religious too, it's very spiritual, so there's a lot of giving back that's really important, things that that stayed with me. And I think I always thought, I want to do that at some point. I want to give back. I didn't really, I think, know exactly what kind of platform I would be given, or I would have the chance to do this with. And so when I was given this platform, I mean, it was, I think it was an amazing chance to be able to do that.
Absolutely. And you've hit on a couple things, just because culturally, I think my family has raised me very similarly, where giving back or being of service was just ingrained in our day-to-day, and it didn't feel like an optional thing that you opt into at times, but really something that you owe the community around you, partially as payment for everything that's been poured into you. But nonetheless, I think, especially in creative industries, there is some risk involved. I know, at least in entertainment, within a couple years, things have very much changed, where now brands are embracing people with voices, where it feels socially in and acceptable to have a platform and a perspective. But it seems, at least personally, a fairly new concept to be able to be so outspoken. And so at the time, I'm just curious, when you decided to really dive into the world of philanthropy and activism, particularly even having been an ambassador for the WHO, you didn't just start with some general, like, I want the world to be a better place. You zeroed in and made sure that you're thinking about your hometown, your community, your work in regards to maternal health is really moving. And I'm curious just what that journey was like, how you got there in terms of personal confidence, but also subject matter, the idea of knowing that this is the work you wanted to focus on?
You know, in Ethiopia, when you're pregnant and when you realize that you're pregnant, one of the huge fears that is going to come at you is that, am I going to make it? Am I going to actually, survive? And it's for everyone. It doesn't matter how much money you have or you don't have money or you're educated. It doesn't matter. It's just a huge, huge risk every time. And I remember when I was pregnant with my son as well, even though I was in New York, I didn't know actually that the problem was geographical. I had no idea. I thought it was just, oh my God, I'm pregnant.
Because it's a panic you've grown up experiencing.
Yeah, it's like, oh, does it mean am I gonna make it? And people here were like, what are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, what do you mean? People die? No, here they don't die. I'm like, oh, here they don't die. So that was new to me, right? So I thought, wait, people are dying in Ethiopia because they don't have access? That's the only reason? I didn't know that. So that got to me. And then I thought, okay, I if you guys want my voice, then I'll definitely put my voice to this because it makes no sense. It just does not make sense, and it's not fair. Just because you're born on the wrong side of the map, and so I thought, okay, I'm gonna, whatever you need, right? I'll just do whatever you need, and that's what I did. I became a spokesperson for the WHO, and I think I did that for a while. I'm glad to go and give speeches, etc. But am I really moving the needle, and what is it that I should be doing? And so I thought, okay, maybe I should start a foundation. So it was kind of, everything was a bit more like very organic.
Yeah.
And I just kind of followed whatever was coming, in front of my path. And so I started a foundation and worked on maternal health for a really long time. And I don't know, hopefully made a dent, I don't know, somewhere.
But thematically, I think what's really moving is this idea of, one, taking obstacles as a sign, but also taking the positive signs as a reminder to move forward and being open and curious enough to allow yourself into spaces that you may not have initially seen yourself in to begin with. And I feel like what you hit on is something that's resonant. I feel like, especially generationally, I've grown up with so many young people that care deeply about our world, and yet we're constantly being faced with this sense of, oh wow, it's a lot more bureaucratic than we thought. Making change isn't as simple as having an opinion or having a bright idea, but there's so much more to it, so many more moving pieces.
I realized, again, when I was doing my foundation, that I had to like go around and raise money all day long, okay? But then you're just giving money, okay? And then the people that you're giving money to the next time, they still need money. And I thought, this is not a sustainable solution. And at the time, Bono was doing his Red campaign. And I thought, oh, wow, this is interesting. And this makes a lot more sense, because then you're now permanently, hopefully, fixing a problem, right? Because you're helping a family, they're going to earn their own money. Whether you're there or not, they will always earn that money. They can send their kids to school. Their kids will be better off than their parents. They'll help their parents. So it's like this amazing circle of positive, all around. And so from that was born, in a way, Lemlem, my brand, that is all made in Ethiopia. Well, now I have other African countries, but most of the stuff is made in Ethiopia. It's all handmade, and all the artisans, and to see like the development of the artisans, the evolvement of the artisans, and how they feel about even their work, about, I think, inspiring also people on the continent or people even in Ethiopia to wear, again, their, hand-woven clothing. Because what had happened was everyone was just wearing jeans and T-shirts, as I do, obviously, and only wear traditional clothing only for events. So the whole, even the local economy was dying. And now suddenly it's resprouting again, because also we're like bringing in new styles, new way of doing it, even though you're using the same artisans. Now they're doing different things. I see a solution. I'm going to try it and see if it works. We've struggled with it, but we kept doing it, and now we've expanded into other African countries. And I feel like I'm really proud that we're able to, after 14, 15 years now, that we're able to have a proper brand, a proper business with like a really cool identity with it. I think that's been kind of amazing on a local level. And then just opening up a whole new customer base. For this one, so now when you talk to the artisans and they think, oh my God, someone in New York is wearing what I made, it's amazing.
Absolutely.
It's an amazing feeling.
But I mean, it's really moving, just because I think what you're saying is something that I at least really received one in terms of being okay to invest that amount of time in what you care about. I think in this age of instant gratification, which I know I'm definitely susceptible to, this idea of like, come on, I've been working on this for a month. Why aren't things drastically different, versus really settling in and hunkering down for what will be the long run and finding your next evolution in what the journey ends up being. We've talked a bit about your philanthropic journey and your brand, and I'm wondering from all of that experience how it's made you either reapproach or see the fashion industry, because you're coming in now with the perspective of having run a business, having seen what fashion can do as a platform for social good.
I think what all this does to me is actually I appreciate fashion even more, because I guess I understand more now all the work that's done behind, you know, and I don't know, I love designers, I love and also because I feel like I've learned so much from them, you know, and I've learned a lot from stylists, and I wouldn't have started a brand if I hadn't had in a way that the chance of working with these incredible people. I think in terms of diversity, I feel like the world has changed. So not just, in a way, it's not just fashion that has changed, or it's not just fashion that became diverse. I feel that diversity in general is kind of has seeped through everywhere and in everything. And that's a good thing. And then I also feel like the customer, which is basically at the end of the day, they're the ones who decide, really, right? So I feel like that customer is also very much emboldened now, and they're more asking for what they want. So that's a different, I think, approach to things. And so you can't deny that as a brand anymore, which is a good thing, obviously.
Yeah, and how has your daughter even challenged your perceptions of fashion? Because I know within a generation, me looking at my 15-year-old brother, his ideas of utilizing fashion and creativity as unabashed self-expression has grown even in the 8-year difference between us. I think I've always had a very positive experience with how I use certain creative industries and fields, but he's taken it to a level that I really could never have imagined how to check that in myself.
No, I understand. I mean, I feel that, like, it's like, you know, it's like what I just said, because people are now demand. Like, we didn't demand, you know, like, at least we don't have the same generation, but like, especially with my generation, I think we were more on the receiving end, right, of fashion, of what they told us was great. Now, the kids, especially, and I can see, they use fashion much more than us as a way to express who they want to be. And I think that's kind of amazing. And I think that's the thing that we didn't have, I feel like, and the kids now and the you know, all the generations that come are more that. They really are experimenting, and, you know, it's different, completely different angle, different perspective at all. So it's, I mean, I envy them because it's so much more about being an individual. And I love that. I've always wanted that kind of thing. And I feel like just the fact that I, you know, just coming to America and living there, that's kind of my thing, was looking for that individualism in a way, you know, like having the freedom to do what you want and not do what you're expected to. And, you know, as a woman, as an African woman, well, there's a lot of things that are piled on you, right? Culture, social, religion, and trying to get away from that by running away in a way, right? But then today it's a different time. Yeah. So when I see my daughter, fashion is more playful and so much more, and there's so much more breadth to it too.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing that we've talked about briefly, but going back to, because you've been somebody that has really been insistent on being of service and finding ways to be of service. I think there's a lot of people that are right now looking at fashion industry or creative industries generally and seeing how far we've come, but how much further we have to go, but also really stuck in that feeling of overwhelm, of knowing how much bigger this is than any one of us. And I'm wondering, from your experience, really, if you had any advice or any observations of what made the journey bearable, what made you feel like it was worth coming back, what made it feel like, you know what, even if the fashion industry isn't perfect, even if I'm the only one Black person in the room, I'm the only one, it's worth coming back to be, and it's worth being the change, because being the change is a lot of work.
I mean, I think you just have to follow your heart. There's no other miracle, anything, you know? Everything is overwhelming, by the way. Anything you want to do is overwhelming. If you really look at if you look at the mountaintop, you're never going to get up that top, right? You can't, you won't climb if you know how far you have to go.
That's great context to keep in mind, because you're absolutely right. Yeah. There feels like we assign more risk to certain things or certain activities versus realizing that any game you want to play.
If you want anything different, are you getting out of a path? It's gonna be terrifying. And I think and I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying I think it's trying not to look up too much and just trying to just do, slowly what's in front of you and just go step by step. I think that's the only way you can do anything.
Being okay, slow and steady.
Slow and steady.
My family has always been a big proponent of the support network, of saying there are people in your corner that you can turn to in these difficult times, and vice versa. You're supposed to be that person in someone else's corner, helping them. And in this time in which we are switching from being the only one into a room to walking into a room surrounded by many people of different backgrounds, I want to know who's in your support network, who keeps you going, who is that person that can help inspire you.
I feel like every time I meet people, like even you inspired me, like hearing your story I was like, oh my God, I can't believe she did that. Doing school and like that's inspiring. It doesn't matter. It's super inspiring because I'm like, I know how hard that is. I mean, I understand. It was not easy for you, I'm sure. But then to have the stamina and the energy and the willingness to do, that's inspiring. It doesn't matter. You don't need some, I mean, for me at least, it doesn't have to be some guru who has to come and tell you this is how you. I think everyone who's doing something passionately will inspire me. And I love meeting people who are doing things. And I love meeting people who are creative. And I love meeting people who think outside of the box. I hate the box.
You're so deeply immersed in every creative industry, from your love of reading to just your participation in fashion, acting, etc. I want to know, what are your thoughts on the role of culture and change? Because I think so much of our conversation has surrounded the role of creativity and culture as setting the groundworks for a different future.
I think change comes from creative people, because you have to be creative to be able to see another type of way to live, right? And I think that's how things change. You have to first be able to imagine it. And I think for that, you have to be creative enough to imagine something different. And it's not easy, obviously, especially, it depends on your circumstance and, what you're dealing with on a day-to-day. But that's why I also love books, because writers will write you a different story. They'll write you a different way of being, or they'll express different feelings that you don't know, because you don't feel those, because you're not that person, for example. But then you can finally understand maybe what's going on in another person's life and how they're thinking, or another person with a different color, different religion, different sexual, whatever it is, right? And I think that those are the things that will help us, hopefully. The more we understand, I feel like the more tolerant we've got to be. So that will bring change.
It reminds me of the fact that I often say, and I don't know how right I am, but I think a lot about the fact that Sir Isaac Newton had to be really bored to come up with the concept of gravity. But more than that, he had to be so unburdened by the day-to-day struggles of trying to survive, trying to see yourself in the world, to think about and give time to this imaginary, unknowable, unseeable force that keeps our world grounded. And so when I think about the importance of creativity as a woman, as a Black woman, as somebody that's first generation on my side, I think about all of the potential we hold as a community, because we've already created so much, even with so many obstacles in our space. And so what I'm looking forward to in this time, especially hearing you speak, is this idea that now we live in such a different time, and while there are still issues, there's so much more space to play. There's so much more space to create. There's so much more space to imagine. And now, to your point, maybe we are going to get to a world that doesn't have to look like the one we're in now, because we now have more people that have the space to think than ever, and really consider what a future could look like.
I know, I completely agree with you. And sometimes challenges also bring about new ideas. So it's interesting also to see, you know, what are sometimes, you know, you don't know. And I also feel like you don't really know where it's going to come from, especially a big change. You just don't know, right? It's like dormant, you know, it's quite, and then it takes you by surprise. And sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not.
So what's keeping you motivated at this moment? Could be anything, a song, a person, a feeling.
I think my kids, really. Mm-hmm. That's that kind of keeps me. That's mostly that.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you so much just for your time and your insight. I think it's really inspiring to see the fact that there's so many different ways to approach a challenge and how much beauty can come from that. And even just your sharing of being okay to being open to your heart. And so many times in this world where we're focused on career, we forget that that can be motivated from passion, and just how much can blossom when passion's at the core of it.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate your conversation as well. Thank you very much.